Hey there. Here is yet another book, jazz book. David Baker's How to Play Bebop 1, a classic. So I'm gonna use this book to add stuff to what we already know, bop scales over a blues. So before I start talking too much about this book, let's just get right into it. We're gonna play a blues in C bop scales. So a C Mixolydian bop scale, F Mixolydian bop scale, C again, right? G bop scale, and C. Over a backing track. So and now some of you are thinking, hang on, there are more chords in a jazz blues. So there's a blues, which I'm kind of playing, deriving the bop scales from just a regular blues in C, but there are more chords in this, what they're playing on this backing track. And the thing is that I think that it sounds pretty good even though I ignore some of those chords. And I've talked about that before, and that's what the previous book I covered by Jerry Coker, he calls that harmonic generalization. So which is, you don't have to play every chord. You don't have to play the exact correct scales that corresponds with every chord. You can ignore some chords and it actually sometimes sounds better. You don't want to do that out of laziness, but you want to do it because sometimes simplifying things is actually a good thing to do. So for example, when I'm playing the C mixo bop scale and we're arriving at the A, that scale works over that chord too, right? So the same thing with the D minor, G7, the G bop scale, mixo bop scale works over those two chords as well. So that's why that works. So now we want to add some stuff to these bop scales, some little jazz idioms or phrases, cliches, ornamentations, whatever you want to call it. And the first thing we're going to add is what I call the thank you David Baker lick. So David Baker is the author of this book, right? Huge, very influential jazz educator. And when I went to jazz college, we used to joke about this phrase. So what it is this, right? So it's like, it sounds like you're saying thank you David Baker, thank you David Baker, right? Jazz humor is maybe not the funniest thing in the world, but it is a little bit more interesting than just running the scales, right? So if I do that over each of these scales and over the blues, it would be a little bit of a fingering issue there. Should I do that or should I do... By the way, I like to go and use the index finger as much as possible, kind of in Django Reinhardt tradition. The index finger is very superior to doing position shifts, I think. Or I play the G with that finger. In order to make it sound more jazzy, you don't want to maybe pick every note, but you want to use slides and, you know, hammer-ons and whatever. So that's kind of these things can kind of help you find that jazz language, right? So I'm gonna play every scale now over the blues, but I'm gonna end each scale with the Thank You David Baker lick. So here we go. Right, you're also noticing that I'm ignoring the quick change there. So it doesn't bother me, so if it sounds good, it sounds good. So then I don't care too much about, I don't worry too much about that, if it works or not. If it sounds okay, then, you know. Moving on okay. To the next little idiom here. The little phrase I call the Donna Lee phrase. Right? So there I'm gonna start the bop scale and I'm gonna play it descending from the third. And when I hit that third, I'm gonna play that Donna Lee phrase, which is like a arpeggio. Right? So let's see what that sounds like. I am a little bit worried about the quick change because I'm landing on the E when we're playing an F. So maybe not the best idea to do that there. So those are little things you can consider. Maybe I should go to... I don't know, as long as you resolve the line, it's fine. Another thing you can do is you can, when you hit that A7, C sharp arpeggio. So hopefully that's what happens, is that you can start to see that how you can connect these things. That's kind of how you play bebop. You connect the little scales and arpeggios and the little jazz bebop idioms in order to play bebop. Next idea is a 10-note bop scale. So by the way, I am getting this stuff from this book, right? So it's not, that's why I'm doing this. There's tons more, of course, in this book, but all these ideas are coming from this book. So 10-note bop scales I've talked about before. That's adding even more chromaticism to a bop scale. So if you don't know what that is, you can check out my previous lesson called 10-note bop scale, I think it's called. So from the third, we're going down chromatically to the root. Right, so but here we're just gonna do it in one octave, so maybe like that. Let's listen to it. Another thing is that anytime you find yourself not finding the notes and you're struggling, you want to stop the backing track that you're using, hopefully, and make sure that you figure out what you're doing wrong and then do it again. That's how you learn, right? So, yeah, so two things you need when you're practicing is you need coffee, and then you need an Instagram cardigan. Somebody told me that it's very important when you make videos that you have an Instagram jazz fusion cardigan. So got one of those. I don't know if this qualifies as a cardigan. I think it does. So the next thing is a little bit more of a topic in and of itself, is when you're adding surrounding notes chromatically. So we're gonna surround the G, for example, from above and below. If I do that in a bop scale, it's gonna sound like this, right? Uh, like that. You can also surround the root like that. And what you can do is that as a guitar player, you can do this. So I'm using the index on the A flat, and the F sharp or G flat I'm playing there, and then I'm using the index on the D flat, the B with the pinky, and then what you can do there is you can do this kind of stuff and keep going. You hear that quite a lot in certain types of players. It's kind of like they're not even picking that note. You can just hammer on, right? So, and you can keep going until you hit another chord tone and then continue the bop scale from there. So if I go all the way down to the E, right? So then you get that kind of stuff. Can be really cool. It's kind of like a trumpet thing. I hear trumpet players do that all the time. But it can also be very, you know, when what we jazz musicians call bullshit is when you start playing bullshit, right? So like, but if you do it in the right way, I think it can be really cool. And yeah, that was that. I hope I digress here, but let's just make it simple for now. So we're gonna add just the surrounded G, and then continue with the bop scale. So then from F, and then, and so on. So here we go. By the way, I'm adding that notation as a PDF for the stuff I'm playing there. And if you're a Patreon, you can get access to those PDFs. Because I want to give my Patreons, thank you so much, by the way, something, you know, special because they're my Patreons. So one of the things I'm doing with this YouTube channel is I'm showing you books that I think are really good. And this is one of those really good books. So obviously, I'm not covering everything when I'm covering a book like this. I'm just scratching the surface of what is in this. There are two more books in this series, by the way. This is just part one. And so I'm thinking about ordering those other ones as well. And that's another thing about having Patreons is that money that I'm getting from that is going towards buying stuff like that so I can make more videos. I'm not getting doing this to get rich or anything. And this book is very, very good, and it's also a good idea to get an actual book for many reasons. One of the reasons is that you can write, make notes in the book and see where you are and write down like what you need to work on and so forth. I find when I get PDFs, sometimes people give me PDFs with tons of books. I don't never use them. When I have an actual physical book, I tend to use it more. I'm not against technology at all. It's just that I really like books, as you can see. Another thing I want to mention is that I've talked about this before, that what we're doing here is not music. It's not creative at all. You can be creative with this stuff, but we're just learning the grammar of jazz, because I see jazz as a language. And I'm trying to improve my French right now, so I use an app, right? And I'm just learning you have to repeat words and phrases over and over, and it's got nothing to do with creativity, right? But if I go to France, I'm not gonna repeat grammar, right? Hopefully my grammar will be good enough so that I can express myself. The same thing with jazz. If you don't know any jazz phrases, you need to do this kind of stuff. Or some people can find a completely unique way of playing on their own, and they like Alan Holdsworth, right? If you're a genius like Alan Holdsworth, that's great, but most of us have to kind of learn the language. And this kind of book can help you with that. And so I'm just running scales and adding these kind of things and arpeggios. Obviously is not creativity. So some people have commented that it's too technical. Well, yeah, that's the point. We're trying to learn a language. Then when you know the language, then you can let go of all this stuff and just hopefully play. So there's this fear, apparently. Some people think that if I do this too much, I'm just gonna play, it's gonna sound like I'm just playing scales. But I don't think so. Because if you have that attitude already, that means that you're not gonna do that, if you know what I mean. There might be you have to maybe go through a phase when you're practicing this stuff when it's gonna sound like that, but you're gonna grow out of it, I think. So basically this book covers what you can do with bop scales, but there's also some licks, and he talks about the diminished scale, the half whole scale, and there's something he calls the perpetual motion exercise, and then there is also some whole tone scales, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. So, yeah, so it's a really good book. I strongly recommend it, and I shall see you next time.